I'm Scott Allen Miller. It is the 14th of July, 2022, and this is my vlog of daily life in León, Nicaragua. Welcome to the show, and today I'm testing out a little bit different of a camera rig. This is the Olympus EM1 again today with the 25mm f1.8 to see how this looks. I'm trying to shake things up a little bit, and I'm down in the Parque, Galicia to see how things look down here. Definitely the background is a lot clearer than in yesterday's shoot, which I did up at the Iglesia Laborio, and the 45mm, the equivalent here. This is 25mm, so in micro four thirds that becomes the equivalent of 50mm. So this is my nifty 50 for this platform, whereas the 45mm is the equivalent of a 90, which gives you quite a lot of background blur just from that, let alone from the aperture. Today is Thursday and a lot of work today. Again, I am mostly sequestered at the house, just trying to get actual work done because I'm so far behind, but doing pretty well. By the end of the day, I'm essentially caught up, and I managed to do quite a bit of video work today. So as of today, I am caught up on these videos as well from my trip to Guatemala. So that's fantastic. All that stuff is now, I'm back to being on par and keeping things going as they happen. So that's fantastic. I'm feeling really good about the day. This evening, Dominica and some friends went out for April's going away party, which is funny because it's a going away party, but she's only going away for 3 weeks and only to Canada. So it's not the most dramatic going away that you can imagine, but they had a party and a concert and went out until very late. I hung out with the kids and we played Genshin Impact together. This is only our second time that we've gotten to do that, and that was a lot of fun. We had a really good time. And earlier in the day, they spent like the entire day up until it was time for us to play together this evening, doing Danganronpa 3, V3, or 53, as they try to make some excuse for, which just shows that whoever made the thing has no understanding of Roman numerals. It would be 8, not 53, because they don't understand how those numbers work. 5 in front of a 3 does not make it 50. That's an L. People really need to study Roman numerals if they're going to use them. Anyway, especially clockmakers who write 4 wrong all the time. And it makes me wonder, how well can they tell time if they can't even count to 4 in the numbering system that they use on clocks, right? Think about it. All right, so I mean, my day was pretty uneventful. I don't have a lot to share other than I got to do my first work in OM Log 400 here on the Olympus, and I like the way that the video turned out. So I'm really happy with yesterday's video, and Valentina gave me really good feedback on it, and she's the only one who has seen it at this point, so I'm hoping that you guys will see that soon. I also managed to do some videos for my Sam IT channel. That's gonna be a little while before they post. I got one done months ago, and it hasn't gone up yet. I got 2 more done today, and I'm really hopeful to get a few more in the pipeline, but Valentina is working on new graphics and everything for that. So hopefully we are going to have new episodes coming out regularly and quite soon, because I want to get that channel going again as well. It still, even after all this time, has roughly double the subscribers that we have on this channel. And this one is doing really well. So first of all, thank you to everybody. And while I'm mentioning it, please remember to like, subscribe, leave your comments below and all that, but I'm not done. Now we're gonna go into today's topic, which is what I said at the beginning. We're gonna talk about infrastructure items here in Nicaragua, because some people were asking about it and it's worth mentioning, specifically internet, water, and sewer and power. These are the big 4. So first of all, sewer is just kind of a non-issue. The sewers work everywhere. It's hard for that really not to work, so you can ignore that. That simply works. Let's talk about the big 3 and start with water, because that's the biggest negative. If you're coming from the United States or Canada, and I just swallowed a fly, by the way. If you're coming from the United States or Canada, you're coming from countries who have some of the best water supplies in the world. Now, that being said, much of the United States is in drought, and it is in constant news just how much panic there is in the United States about the future of its water supply, and there is a lot of fighting and fear and panic in many areas because they've run out of water, and people are now getting homes that have no water supply. So it's important to remember that even in the United States, a world leader in water, there are significant areas, entire cities, where the water supply is tenuous or has already failed, and there are people getting houses, new construction, that have no hope of future water source, not even now or the future. All right, so keep that in mind. But the vast majority of the United States, places that I have lived, New York, Texas, Michigan, Virginia, Maryland, South Carolina, all of those places, Pennsylvania, all have really, really solid water supplies essentially everywhere. You get pressurized water always available, and you always have a way to heat it. I realize that happens inside your house, not as a utility, but still worth mentioning. So what's the situation here in Nicaragua? Because people worry about it. Well, here, first of all, the water is potable. You can drink essentially any water anywhere in the country. That's not really a problem. That is a misconception, mostly coming from people who have heard about Mexico and take that, which is several countries away, and a completely different government, and apply their water supply issues to Nicaragua. Nothing in Nicaragua is affected by how they do things in Mexico. Why does Mexico have so many problems with their water supply? I have no idea. I honestly don't. I do know that that is a significant problem, and friends who live there actually have to deal with it. Like, there's actually things you have to deal with when you live in Mexico, even as a resident. Of course, tourists who go there, famously there's Montezuma's curse, but that is not a thing here. Nobody comes here, drinks the water and says, oh no, I got sick from drinking the water. It just realistically doesn't happen. If it was to happen, it would be just as unlikely as it is in the United States. Now, that said, I know people who've gone to Costa Rica and gotten sick from the water. So it's not that it's isolated to Mexico, but it is not something that simply spills over country to country. It's not just because you speak Spanish that the water is bad. It is not because it is hot that the water is bad. There are other factors. Here in Nicaragua, the water supply is safe. That doesn't mean we always drink out of the tap. It doesn't always taste the best. And there are some places that have legitimate fears of having old pipes in the ground. That doesn't mean they have old pipes in the ground. It just means they're worried about it. And there are some areas, of course, that work off of wells. And as someone who grew up on a well with an awful lot of salt, it's sometimes unpleasant even when it's healthy. So the common thing here in Nicaragua is that most people are using bottled water, at least most people at middle class and up. Bottled water is extremely cheap. You can get it from Coca-Cola, you can get it from the beer companies, and there are local bottling places. We actually get ours bottled up in the mountain village city of Esteli and have it brought down. We think it tastes just a little bit better, and it costs a little bit less when you buy it in large volume. But that's what people do, right? You get the big, like 5-gallon or 10-gallon, whatever that is, the huge things that you use that to get a cup of water or whatever when you're gonna make your coffee, and you get bottles in the stores and stuff. Is that ideal? Coming from the US where tap water is so good and you always use it, I do wish we did that more, but I can always drink the tap water here. It's not an issue at all. If you're going to be visiting, you really don't have to worry about it. If you're going to live here and drink the tap water every day, then you're probably going to want to either check on your local municipality or have your water tested. It is not a big deal, just to make sure that there's nothing in it you don't expect. The thing that you're looking for is heavy metals. As long as you don't have heavy metals in the water, chances are you're completely fine. If you're on the beach, it's different. We worry about getting salt in the water, which happens when the ocean water commingles with the well water. That's a different problem. It happens on every beach, anywhere where you have wells. So just be aware, beaches are different, but when you're watching my channel, we own several places on the beaches, and that means we're constantly dealing with beach water supply issues. Here in the city, we don't have any of that. But that's only about the potability of the water. The water is always safe. But the real question is the water always available? And that's where the answer is no. Now, this will vary very much from city to city. As far as I know, Managua and Granada always have water. Beach towns anywhere always have water supply concerns. Even Miami is at a point of water supply emergency. So the best places on the beaches are going to be at water risk. But ignore those, that's universal. Coming into the city here in León, this is a great example of a place that has water supply issues. There's not enough water pressure during the day some days. Most days we have water 24/7 and it's no problem at all. Today happens to be an example of a day where we didn't have water, which is funny. Someone mentioned it yesterday and I'm like, it's generally pretty good. And then within hours it was shut off. Some days we only have low water pressure, some days we have none at all. Today it was just a trickle for many hours during the day. Not a huge deal, we are used to it, and we know that you don't plan for being able to use pressurized water during the day. You simply work around it, but it's something you have to understand. It's different than in the United States where pressurized water is never in question. Even when the power's out in the United States, you have pressurized water. That's one of the reasons that we traditionally had water towers. You don't really need those today, but that's why they existed in the past, to guarantee pressurized water under all circumstances. Here, there are things that happen during the day, whether it's major construction, such as our new hospital going in, or irrigating fields outside of the city that need to take precedence during certain times of the day, and so they redirect the pressure of the water to go to those places. And so sometimes we lose during the middle of the day when people tend not to be home because they're at work. The water is redirected towards places where people are working and away from where they live. It's not the best, but it really does happen. Not every day, but we know it can happen during the day. Very rarely on weekends, not uncommonly during the week, and today was one of those days. So How much does that impact you? Well, typically, like today, by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the water was back to normal, not a big deal. However, it is worth noting, even when it's normal, our pressure is not high like you're used to in the United States. We simply don't have as much pressure in the water. Not a big deal, doesn't really affect us day to day, but it's worth noting that the pressure is different. When we have very low pressure, most people, or at least those who can afford it, buy large water tanks, and some of us also buy pumps. Now, a lot of people put tanks up on towers. That is a traditional way. So basically you have a small water tower of your own, and that takes care of your pressure for you, even if there's no power. For a lot of us, that's a big pain. We simply get a pump, and if the power goes out as well, which rarely goes out for very long, we have pressurized water from that. No tower, it just makes things a little bit more convenient in a lot of cases. For us, we just flip the pump on when we want it and flip it off when we don't here at our house. At the hotel, we have multiple tanks and a pump that runs all the time, but has an auto sensor to know when it's being drawn or not. You have lots of options, right? This is not an insurmountable problem, and it's something that people are used to dealing with all the time here and in many locations. When Dominica and I and the kids lived in Noto, Sicily, in Italy, we had exactly the same problems. We knew every day we only had water for about 2 hours. We had a tank that had to be filled. It was a very small tank, nothing like what we have here. We had to run a pump to fill it. If you didn't run the pump, the water would never come through the system because the pump actually blocked the water. And so you had to know exactly when to turn it on, exactly when to turn it off, how much you could use every day, and that anything like a shower had to be done during that 2-hour window. So in Italy, it was atrocious how bad the water supply was, and that was only about 6 years ago. It is so much worse than what we have here. Here it is simply annoying. We have big tanks, giant tanks are very cheap. You simply let the city fill it when there's water pressure, which you don't have to be involved. It'll happen automatically at night or whatever, and you use the pump simply to pressurize the water that you're using. If you want to take a shower, flip on the pump, boom, you've got a nice pressurized shower, and then you have pressure possibly greater than you would have in the United States if you want. The difference is in Italy, we had to use the pump to suck from municipal, or else it would never come into our tanks at all. And then the tanks just gravity fed. But here we automatically fill from the municipal regardless of the pump, and we only use the pump to additionally pressurize our in-house or in-hotel water. So water is a challenge, but not a big deal as long as you know that that's something you're very likely or very possibly gonna have to deal with. Now let's talk about power. There's been, when we first got here, we had really solid power for quite some time. Then, due to the construction of the new hospital in León, we had a lot of power disruptions, but generally they're very short. Sometimes they do rolling through the city, this neighborhood, then this neighborhood, then this neighborhood, while they do maintenance or whatever, and that does happen. We've had no major power outages since we've been here. We've had several that have lasted a few hours. We have tons that last just a minute or a few seconds. That happens, that is unfortunate. But overall, it is important to note, Nicaragua is a power positive nation. We create surplus electricity and we sell it to all of our neighboring nations, including as far away as Mexico. So we have a lot of surplus power. We don't have those conversations like turn off your air conditioning because we don't have enough power. 7 years ago, we did, but today we do not. So the world is very different. You can also put in solar, you can put in wind. We have a lot of green power here. We have geothermal from the volcanoes, we have hydroelectric from the rivers, and we have a lot of wind, especially in southern Rivas. So power supply is not really an issue, it is just power delivery. Most of our large interruptions actually are caused by things outside of the region or by the hospital going in. Now that the hospital seems to be hooked up to the grid, our power has been very reliable. We had a few months there where it was having a lot of disruptions, but that has gone away. So we had a large block of time, it was good, a small block of time, it was bad, and now it's been good again for quite some time. Fingers crossed that that continues. It sounds when you watch my videos, because I do a video every day and I talk about every time the power goes out, and I tend to go out for walks and do videos because the power is out. It may seem like the power is out a lot more than it actually is. If I was to be doing these same things in New York or in Texas, places that I have lived previously, I would not be able to make videos because I would be unable to charge my cameras for days at a time. We moved to Nicaragua right after going through a 2-week power outage in Dallas, Texas. And after the power outage was over, continuously since then, the word from Texas has been, please turn off your air conditioning, do less, because we don't have enough power for the system. That's dramatic. They're in a constant state of failure, and please don't use the power, we don't have enough. In New York, where my father is, he has had bigger outages in the time we have lived here than we have while here, right? So you have to be able to compare. Do we have power outage issues here? Absolutely. Are they as bad as we are used to experiencing in the United States? Not at all, right? Completely different world. I would take this over the US any day. Plus, it's really easy to have a generator here. So while we don't have one at our house here, we just have some UPS units for the computers and stuff. At the hotel, we have multiple generators. We just kick those on and we have plenty of power for whatever we need there, including running air conditioning. So not a big deal. Once again, it's all about putting these things in perspective. Is it perfect? No. The water, definitely not as good as most of the United States. The power, definitely better than most of the United States. So let's talk internet. This is the biggest win here. Internet here is fantastic. First of all, it is not that expensive, but more importantly, it is highly reliable fiber nearly everywhere in the country, at least out here on the Pacific side of the country where nearly everyone lives. It's something like 95% of the population lives around the Pacific coast, not on, but near the Pacific coast. Managua, Granada, Masaya, León, Chinandega, Rivas, Huigalpa, those cities, Esteli, Jinotepe, Didiambra, Jinotega, Matagalpa, right? Those cluster of cities have nearly all the population. All of them and all of the area in between them is all covered by fiber. Fiber that is very reliable, very affordable, and reasonably fast. You are not going to find speeds generally as fast as the fastest in the United States, but our average is excellent. You can get hundreds of megabits symmetrical nearly anywhere. I have clients all over the United States, and out of hundreds of clients or possibly thousands of clients in the US, only a handful have internet as good to rival what we have at every one of our locations here. We have high speed at the beach, in a very tiny community, very remote. We have really high speed here in Colonial León, and I'm told these are some of the worst regions in the country because of the colonial, because of the remote locations. You go into places like Granada, San Juan del Sur, Managua, and you're getting even cheaper, way faster options. It's really, really good. It's important to consider. Internet is a reason to come here, not a reason to be worried. And our reliability has been excellent. Now, I have to be fair. When I lived in Texas, we had Verizon, and they were excellent in Texas, and then they sold to Frontier, and they were excellent in Texas for more than a decade. The number of outages we had from our fiber, I could count on one hand, and they were never long-lived. It was great. What we do experience here is during extended power outages, some providers will lose their battery at some point. So we have had some outages. They are isolated to specific providers who don't have generators and only in remote locations. So if you're out on the beach, we have that issue. After a long power outage, eventually the equipment somewhere behind the scenes goes down, even if your local machines still have power. That's real, and that may be what some people are concerned about. Living on a beach is always going to come with limitations. You're here in the city. We have never had a power outage that took out our internet here. Never. That doesn't mean it won't happen. We've never had any outage whatsoever here. That's a big deal. We have had equipment die, which we just replaced. We've had to reboot things. Of course, we've had things be too slow. We've used them too hard, of course. But for actual outages, we have not seen that here in the city, and it's not something that people talk about here. Your internet's out is not really a thing that people worry about. It's also worth noting that our cell service is very well covered. There are multiple carriers, and their speeds are far better than you normally experience in the United States. So even if you don't want to have high-speed cable or high-speed fiber or high-speed fixed Wi-Fi at home, you can get really, really high speed. They call it 4.5 LTE here. And 4.5G LTE, and it gets hundreds of megabits per second, and you can get that very low cost on a cell phone. So you have lots of options, mobile and fixed, and they're everywhere. You're looking at you don't have to ask, what about this city? Does it have good internet? Yes. Is it a city in Nicaragua? It has good internet. It's not like the United States where there are backwater cities that have no access to good internet, like Houston or San Francisco or Cincinnati, where it is absolutely terrible and people have no idea how to reliably get service, and if their provider doesn't take care of them, they're completely trapped because it's a monopoly. It is not like that here. This is a free market, and there are competitive fiber carriers everywhere, and if they're not competing, cable and fixed wireless do, and so it pressures them to put in fiber. But there's been such a drive to put fiber everywhere that just like the water supply increased so much in the last 7 years, now just when I was here before, it was fixed wireless and some skimpy cable everywhere. It made things really tough. Now it's fiber everywhere, and it was 2 years ago. So for the past 2 years, we've never had to worry about going anywhere in the country. Anytime we're looking at real estate, we don't have to worry whether fiber is available. Even our new property on a very remote location in a very tiny village, quite a ways away from the hotels and anybody who currently has internet, we called the fiber provider and they're like, oh yeah, you're gonna have to pay a couple $100s for us to run the fiber, the last little bit to get to your house. I don't know why these kids are so loud. I swear they do it to get on camera. I'm hoping that the microphone being so close to my mouth will filter some of this out. There is so many people screaming directly at me. There's someone screaming right over there. There's a bunch of people screaming right there. There's a bunch of people talking right there. When I came here, I was completely isolated in basically what is a field. It's a park, but everyone kind of moved to be as close to me as they can. And they all sit and kind of watch me, and then they kind of move. And yeah, it's a little bit much. Okay, and so the internet is phenomenal here. And it's also important to note that people coming from the United States, because there is such a thing of false marketing trying to convince you that you need higher speeds for everything you do, that people have a tendency to think what's important is your download speed. And there are times where that matters, but there aren't very many times where that matters. The average person has no need for super high-speed internet, especially on the download. You need enough to be able to do your Netflix and for the number of people you have. So getting 30, 40, 50 megabits per second may make a lot of sense for you. It is an extremely rare household that has any way to utilize greater than 50 megabits per second. Get above 100 and you're basically down to nobody is going to be leveraging that. Or if you do, it's in such isolated circumstances you'll never notice. In the United States, the majority of services are asymmetrical, meaning you get lots of download and very little upload. And that works fine for the majority of people. Most people upload extremely little, except for when you're taking a backup. But for those of us who live abroad, and those of us who do like YouTube, we have an extreme need for uploads and not for downloads. And so that service would be terrible. So a lot of places I go in the United States, they advertise 500 megabits per second, crazy fast, the fastest you can possibly get. I can't upload a video because it's 500 by 10. I have customers all over the US. Oh, we have such great fast internet. We test it and we're like, you can't make phone calls. You can't send emails because you're completely constrained. Your couple of x-rays you're trying to send are so large that your internet's completely saturated for the next hour. You have such slow internet. And they're like, what? I thought it was 500. We're like, no, internet comes in 2 numbers for speed plus a latency number. And the numbers that are most important are the latency and the upload. Obviously not the one that they tell you the one that's easy to provide for cheap. So that's what everybody ends up being sold. Oh, I got 500. No, you got 10. And well, my ping must be good, right? My latency's good. Well, no, it's probably 30. It should be 4, right? When I lived in Dallas, I got one of 2. Here, I get like 7. Lots of people I know in the United States and businesses are getting 20 or 30. Bigger is worse, right? That is the amount of time it takes to do a round trip. So you want that number to be as tiny as possible. 2 is mind-blowingly good. So here we almost always get symmetric. So even if you're only getting 20 or 30 or 40 or maybe 50, that's 40 by 40 that we're talking, not 40 by 5 or 40 by 10 like you typically get in the United States. Because of that, you're able to do so much more. You can upload things, take backups, and do all of those sorts of things without worrying at all, and you still have enough speed to watch all your things. Your ping times, your latency typically are quite good, especially if you're on fiber. Even if you have to do things back to the United States, that's where your data is coming from, latency numbers from here are pretty good. We've tested this extensively because I work for a phone provider in the United States. If you want to look us up, we're talkadillo.com. And with that, we always have to know how are our phones going to work when we connect to our phone system in the United States. Our desk phones essentially plug into our US phone system. And what we see here is between 30 and 60 milliseconds for that. And the only number you have to worry about for phones is being under 200. The more under, the better, but it doesn't actually matter. You can't hear it till it's over 200. So being at about 55 as an average is fantastic. That means that when you're using services in the US, you can do video and you can do audio two-way communications in real time without anybody noticing, excuse me. And if you're going to do file transfers and lots of other things, you don't care about that latency number, so doing things to the US is no problem. If you're doing things here in country, you're looking at between 5 and maybe 10 milliseconds, which are very good, comparable to the speeds you would get inside the United States. So you're in great shape all around. The internet here makes it possible to work often better than if you're in the United States. And I actually have customers in some of those really bad US cities who hire staff here to give them phones because they can work remotely to the offices in the United States better than the staff in the United States can, because they can get internet providing so much better here, so much faster, so much lower latency, so much more reliable, that the staff in the United States will go offline for days at a time or have really bad service and they can hear it, it doesn't sound good, but the staff here, crystal clear, no problems whatsoever, because everything is so fast and reliable. So for internet, Nicaragua is a giant win. I don't know anybody in the region who has internet so universally good as Nicaragua, and certainly no one in North America. The United States and Canada are famous for how bad their internet is as an average. They each have hot pockets of really good service. New York City, famously good. Chicago's gonna be really good. Dallas is really good. Austin is fantastic. Why Austin is so good and San Francisco so bad, I have no idea. In Canada, sure, Toronto and Montreal are going to be really good, but much of Canada is going to be horrific, which is partially just because it's so wide open, there's very little they can do. But here in Nicaragua, everywhere, everybody has access to very high-speed internet. It's an important part of their infrastructure for the future projects. They know that by having good internet, they're able to create new jobs. So that is something they have focused on a lot, along with the new highway systems, which are fantastic. Almost all the highways in the country, not the back roads, but the highways are perfectly smooth, well-maintained, everywhere. They've put in new bypasses. There's a new super highway coming along the Pacific coast. So much is going into the roads. You can get pretty much anywhere in the country by road easily, safely, and quickly because of the new road system. Better than anybody else in the region. Certainly better than Honduras or Costa Rica or Panama or even Guatemala. So much improved. All of these infrastructure items, of all of them, water is the only one that isn't a positive in Nicaragua's favor. And honestly, I don't think it's that bad. It does take several months before you adapt and adjust to just how much it impacts you to not have continuously high pressurized water. Yes, I hate that it's not what we had in the US. I do wish I had that. But it is not something that makes me sad every day. I know how to deal with it. We've gone way past the point of dealing with it day to day. We have a tank, we have a pump, we know when to turn it on, we know what to do, and it is absolutely fine. As long as you're aware that that's something you're going to have to deal with, everything else is going to be dramatically in your favor, or in the case of power, just a little bit in your favor. Thanks for joining me. Please remember to like and subscribe. Ask your questions below. I already said all this, but get in there. Let's talk about what concerns do you have about visiting or coming to live in Nicaragua. Which things do you think are going to be missing that you're used to? Because certainly life is much different here. But infrastructure and utilities, these are things where Nicaragua really shines. And I think you're going to be really happy learning just how much less it can cost and how much better it can get. I also want to mention, I got my water bill for my 7-bedroom, 6-bath house the other day, where there's constantly leaks. Like, even though the water supply is one thing, the actual like old colonial house, there's leaks in the pipes everywhere. So we're always having things running, toilets run and overflow from like the handle, like clean water and stuff. So much wasted water, so many leaky like joints everywhere. That's just maintenance on the house. And still, with all that, our monthly water bill, $2. That's it. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you all tomorrow.